I really hope I'm centered. Hey friends, welcome back. I am excited to talk about one of my favorite things, which is books. So if you know me, you know that I am a big bookie. I want to talk about a couple of highlights, books that I really loved from 2021, the books that I have already read in 2022, and what I'm going to read in 2022, which is a hefty list. My reading goal for 2021 was 40 books and I read 38. So as punishment, which isn't really a punishment, I decided that I am going to try to read 45 in 2022, and I think I'm going to be able to do it. I have plenty of time in the morning and in the afternoon on my commute, on the train. So my list of honorable mentions from 2021. My first book is from one of my favorite modern authors. I have read quite a few of his books over the past maybe 2-ish years, but not all of them somehow. But that is Frederick Backman. So I read A Man Called Of, or Ove. I think it's Of, but I'm not sure. I think of it as Love Without the L. This is basically about a very grumpy old man, and at first you're kind of like, what is this guy's deal? But then you learn what his deal is, and you also see him form some friendships that he's never had before. It's just so touching. Like, he's a little bit frustrating, but you also love him. I really enjoyed this. I love this author. I think his native language might be Finnish, but whoever translates these is an absolute genius. He really manages to translate it in a way that you can tell it totally holds up the original style of the book. It is so funny, and he'll start off a chapter oftentimes kind of giving you a general statement, like this is the way things are, and then he'll jump into the story, and then he'll bring it back at the end of the chapter. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's right. That's what he was talking about, and it's really cool. There's also Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. So this is about Hamnet, who is Shakespeare's son and was the basis of his play Hamlet. So this is about Shakespeare's family, mostly about his wife and kind of this strange reputation that she has. She's very eccentric, and she has this ability with animals, and she's a healer, so she makes potions, she heals people. William Shakespeare falls in love with her and they have kids together. This is just the story of them meeting, but then also her taking care of her kids when he's off being William Shakespeare. These are the kind of books that I love so much, where it's not necessarily the plot that is super captivating, but it's the characters. I really love that. The next couple of honorable mentions that I don't have the books in hard copy. 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. So this is a Greek mythology story, which is one of my favorite things to read about. The story of the women, all of the famous Greek heroes, their wives and their families, and what happened to them when everybody was fighting the war in Troy. If I remember correctly, either every chapter is about a different character. They might follow one storyline a couple of different times, but there's a lot of different characters, and every time you reach the end of a chapter, you don't want to go on to the next because it changes to a different storyline, and you get so sucked in that you don't want it to end, which I think is such a skill. And then the next book I wanted to mention was called Sunflower Sisters. This one is by Martha Kelly. So she wrote Lilac Girls, Lost Roses, Sunflower Sisters. So I read Lilac Girls and Lost Roses a few years back as they came out. Sunflower Sisters came out in 2021. It was absolutely fantastic. So if you haven't read Lilac Girls or Lost Roses, although I highly recommend, each book in the series goes back in time. So although it's interesting to see the family members and the different generations of the characters that you met in the first book, You definitely don't have to read these in order. You could read them as standalone novels. There is no continuation in the storyline in between them. Sunflower Sisters was just as good as the first two. It's a little bit different though. So Lilac Girls is a World War II novel. Lost Roses, I think something about Russia? It happened a while ago. And Sunflower Sisters is in the 1700s, I believe, so the characters you're following are slaves. It's a hard book to read. There's a lot of really disturbing and sad moments, naturally. Even if you don't love to read difficult books, I understand. I think it's important, but it's a very good book. That being said, the author is white, so personally, I think it makes sense as she was going back in time. This was the next timeline to write about, but do with that as you will. Next book is called Self-Compassion. This is a self-help psychology book. The author is Kristen Neff, who has a PhD in psychology of some form or another. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I actually want to make an entire video on this book because it definitely changed my life and everybody and their mother needs to read it. This is a book about self-compassion. She talks a lot about how we tend to have much more compassion for others than we do for ourselves, and we tend to talk to ourselves in a way that we would never talk to other people. And she provides these really concrete skills that you can build in talking to yourself in a nicer way, and also in using self-compassion just to get through hard times. The last and final book that I wanted to give a shout out from 2021 is a classic, and that is Jane Eyre. Being the bookie that I am, a lot of people would be surprised when I would say that I hadn't read Jane Eyre because it is such a classic. Obviously, you've probably heard of it, you've probably read it if you've heard of it, but I just never got around to it until 2021, and I completely understand the hype. I loved it so much. I had an issue with the age gap in the romance, obviously. I don't think that the romance part is the most important part of the book. I think that Jane is such a strong and amazing character, and the kind of character that I think, you know, maybe a lot of women at the time looked up to. I would like to think so. My butt is totally falling asleep and my legs are starting to tingle. Now, jumping into 2022, what I've read so far, and these have been a couple of good ones. So, first one I read of 2022, another Frederick Backman book, and this one actually I think is my favorite that I've read so far. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. This is the kind of book that I want to hug. It is so sweet. It's not first person, but it's told from the perspective of a 7-year-old girl. Her only real friend is her grandmother. But then her grandmother dies and sends her on this mission to deliver letters of apology to a bunch of people in her life from the grandmother. So Elsa ends up gaining all of these new people in her life through her grandmother after her grandmother has died. It's kind of similar to A Man Called Of in that what people appear on the outside is not as they actually are, and you learn the story behind all of these people that have these very interesting and somewhat abrasive outwards personas. It's like it makes me just a little bit emotional just talking about it because I loved it so much. So if you're going to read any of Frederick Backman's books, I would recommend this one. I just checked my viewfinder and all of the books that I have been holding up for you to see thus far you haven't been able to see. So moving forward I'll do it a little bit better. So I like to rate based off of plot. So not necessarily whether there is this incredible build-up climax and it's not release. The word is not release. That's inappropriate. Build-up climax, you know what I mean. It's more just whether the book keeps me engaged. Does it have slow parts? Does it have parts to it that really really draw me in and make it a page turner for me. Probably the most important element is character development. Whether I really feel like I get to know the characters and I really care for them and I care for what they're going through, and they're original. So if they're just a character like any other that I've read, I don't care so much. And another thing that I like to base my ratings off of is the quality of the writing. I enjoy artistic writing, but is it too artistic? Are they trying to be a poet and they know it and they're not doing a good job to show it? I'm the worst. So this, my grandmother, was a 5-star book for me. The next one that I read, this is what happens when I don't vacuum and then I sit on my floor. This is No Land to Light On, Yara Zagib. I'm sorry. This just came out January 4th of this month. Obviously. So I work for a bookstore and we get a lot of these books in before it comes out so that we can read it and start reviewing it. No Land to Light On is about a couple who are from Syria. One of them was a student at Harvard. She immigrated from Syria to go to Harvard on scholarship. And the other one came to America a few years after she did as a Syrian refugee. And they meet and they get married. The husband takes a trip to Jordan, and when he comes back to America, he reaches Logan Airport in Boston, and then the travel ban hits. So everybody who just got off his flight gets sent back, and he is forced to cancel his visa so that he can't come back to America. After all of the hard work that he went through to get it. So these are based off of true events that happened in 2017. I don't know if this was an actual couple. It was a very good book. It was definitely a page turner. This was a 4-star book for me for a few reasons. So the plot was pretty good. You're sort of just reading about how these two people are separated, but also how they got to America and what happened in their lives beforehand. The character development was lacking. That could be strategic because these characters maybe were meant to represent the entire group of people who was affected by what was called the Muslim ban. Another thing I really liked about this book though was the way that it was written. It was very artistic and there were just some really beautiful lines in there, and I would read them and reread them. This woman is a poet and she knows it. She does. The next book that I read, I don't have a hard copy of. I listened to an audiobook. It's called Goodbye Things, The New Japanese Minimalism by Fumio Sasaki. There was a lot of really good information in this book, and I am very interested in minimalism and have been gradually trying to adopt it into my life. This was another 4 out of 5 book for me. There was one point that he made that was like, don't worry about what happens to your stuff after you choose to declutter it. Don't try to give it a new home. Don't try to repurpose it. Just put it in the trash. I think it goes without saying that that is a problematic statement. I do think it is your responsibility, given that they are your things, to responsibly remove them from your life. Whether that be recycling, donating, finding a friend who would like to take them, selling them, repurposing them. Anyways, the last book I wanted to talk about that I've been reading so far in 2022. This is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. We have the same name, which may or may not be one of the reasons why I decided to read this. Because I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the worst covers I've ever seen. I'm so sorry, Elena. I respect you and your name. This looks like a really bad quality romantic, like, bachelorette program from like the early 2000s. Anyways, I'm gonna stop criticizing her cover now, sorry, because it's a really good book. So this is the first book in a long series of books, and they are all really successful. Again, with the character development, it's really amazing. I am not the biggest fan of the plot. I don't feel particularly sucked in and captivated at all times by this book, but I do really like the writing, which is also a translation. I love the dialogue between characters. I love the dynamics between characters. I will very likely be continuing with this series in 2022. And so that brings me to my to-be-read list for 2022. I got a couple of advanced reader copies, the unpublished books, in the mail. I forgot that I had ordered these. They were free and I like to read. So this one is yet another World War II novel, Angels of the Pacific by Elise Hooper. This is about the nurses and it takes place in the Philippines, which is a destination that I have never read about. Japanese occupation and nurses working on the front lines, and that's all that I can really say about it. This other book that I got has another character named Elena. I think this is the most popular character name nowadays. The Moment I Met You by Debbie Johnson. Elena goes on a vacation with her boyfriend. They're away in Mexico when an earthquake happens and the trauma changes Elena's life forever. So yeah, this doesn't sound like it's actually going to be like the cutesy romantic comedy that I was looking for. 10 years later, Elena still can't forget the face of the stranger she met that night, a man who may have saved her life. And maybe they're gonna fall in love. We'll see. Okay, next book. This is an older one, and this one won a, people say this differently, I say Pulitzer Prize a few years back. So this is The Sympathizer by, this I really can't pronounce, I'm so sorry, Viet Thanh Nguyen. I'm so sorry. It has been on my TBR list forever. The back doesn't produce a great image. The narrator is a communist double agent and he builds a new life with Vietnamese refugees in Los Angeles but reports back to his communist superiors in Vietnam. All of these pretty medals on the front is enough for me to want to read it. Next book on my to-be-read list is another book that I have been wanting to read for a very long time. This is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. She also read The Night Circus, which I am also dying to read. This takes place beneath the surface of the earth in a labyrinth of tunnels and rooms filled with stories, which just sounds so cool. I guess each person has a door that they can find that tells their story. I'm gonna read it and I'm sure once I'm in this world I will understand it a little bit better. The next book, this is Alice Hoffman's The World That We Knew. Hani knows she must send her 12-year-old daughter away to save her from the Nazi regime. She talks to the daughter of a rabbi whose years of eavesdropping on her father enable her to create a mystical Jewish creature, a rare and unusual golem she names Ava, who was sworn to protect Leah, who's the 12-year-old daughter. So this immediately what comes to mind for me is a golden compass where each child has their, what was it called? Like their spirit animal. So I'm looking forward to reading that. Last but not least, this is A Piece of the World by Christina Baker Klein. The Exiles is one of my favorite books of all time. Incredible. You have to read it. Read it. So this one is about this woman, talks about her family living on this remote farm. It looks very remote. I just get the sense that this is going to be another Christina Baker Klein work of art with excellent characters. Those are all of the physical books that I have to show you that I will be reading in 2022. Obviously, there are plenty more that I'm gonna have to read to get to my goal of 45 books. I have so many more on my shelves that I'll be able to pull out and go through. I'm trying not to buy any new ones. I just feel like I need to get through the ones I already have so I can start clearing out my shelves a little bit. I did want to mention how I get so many books. I work at a bookstore. We get a lot of books for free. The advanced reader unpublished versions I told you about, those are free for us. You kind of get lucky if you find one that you like and that really interests you and that you really want to read. I actually very rarely buy books new. There are used bookstores everywhere. On average, the books at this used store go for about $5, which is way less than half of market price. So this was $28. A paperback will sell for usually around $16 to $18, and pretty much across the board they go for around $5 at this used bookstore. However, once the books have been there for about 6 months, they put them on clearance for 99 cents. And probably the most accessible option is Goodwill. So I think you would be very surprised by how many amazing books you can find at Goodwill for $2 per paperback, $3 per hardcover. These are just two that I found at Goodwill. I have gotten a lot of books from Goodwill. All you have to do is look through. You just have to spend a little bit of time. It is so worth it when you find things you've been wanting to read. Every time I go to Goodwill, I literally come out with a stack of 5 or 6 books. If you're on a budget like I am, you don't have to buy books new. Buy books new if you're buying from a small independent bookstore. That's my recommendation. They are so good to support, especially because a lot of people take them for granted, but the more people buy from Amazon because they're cheaper, the less these independent bookstores are going to have a chance at staying open for much longer. So if you can afford to, please buy new from independent bookstores. And the way that you can afford to is by otherwise only buying used books. You can absolutely find the ones that you want. It might take a little bit of time, but eventually I was able to find them for a couple of dollars. If you are absolutely dying to read a book, a lot of libraries now have apps where you can just get audiobooks and ebooks right on your phone or delivered to a Kindle or iPad, however you like to read ebooks. That's a great free resource as well. There's a website called thriftbooks.com where you can find tons of used books. You can select what condition you're willing to receive them in, but you can get books in like new or very good condition for, again, $5. Reading can be a very expensive hobby if you always buy new. I'm not going to judge you if you like to buy your books brand new and beautiful. I totally get it. They smell amazing. Thank you so much for watching today. This has been really fun for me. This is my favorite thing to talk about. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked this video. I would like to sort of make the theme of this channel mental health and pleasant things. Things that bring me peace, such as reading, such as organizing, decluttering, skincare, sort of things. I hope you stick around. Bye.